in the quiet, forgotten town of Raven Hollow. There's an old, decrepit building everyone calls Black Pine House. People whisper stories about it, tales spun from rumor and fear, but one story is painfully, chillingly real. It's the story of a cursed doll and the unfortunate girl who found it. 12-year-old Lena Murrow lived a simple life with her grandfather, a kind man who had a peculiar love for collecting old junk from flea markets. One particularly grim, rainy evening, he trudged home, clutching something carefully wrapped in a dusty, threadbare towel. "Found this in a locked chest," he said, his voice warm with excitement. "Thought you'd like it." Lena carefully unwrapped the bundle, and a small smile touched her lips. It was a porcelain doll. Its face was hand-painted with delicate features, its eyes were made of black polished glass, and it wore a beautiful, albeit faded, lace dress. But as she held it, a shiver ran down her spine. Something felt wrong. The doll was cold, unnaturally colder than the biting rain lashing against the window panes. And as Lena lifted it for a closer look, she swore she saw its glassy eyes shift. Just for a fraction of a second, she dismissed it as a trick of the light, a figment of her imagination. A mistake she would come to regret. That first night, Lena placed the doll on a wooden chair in her room, positioning it to face her bed. She always slept with a small nightlight, a comforting warm glow that kept the shadows at bay. But around midnight, the light began to flicker. Once, twice, and then, with a soft pop, it died, plunging the room into absolute darkness. Lying frozen in her bed, Lena heard a sound. It was soft, slow, and methodical. The unmistakable sound of porcelain tapping on wood. Tap, tap, tap. Her heart hammered against her ribs. With trembling hands, she fumbled for her phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed the beam across the room. Her breath caught in her throat. The doll was no longer on the chair. It was now sitting at the foot of her bed. Its black glass eyes seemed to bore right through her, reflecting the harsh light from her phone, just staring. The next morning, Lena tried to explain what had happened to her grandfather. He just chuckled, ruffling her hair. "It's just your imagination, kiddo," he said kindly. "A bad dream, that's all." But Lena knew it wasn't her imagination, and what happened next proved it. The strange occurrences escalated. She'd deliberately leave the doll in her room, only to find it sitting at the kitchen table, or propped up in the hallway, right in the middle of the path. Once she found it in the bathroom standing on the counter, its cold porcelain face turned towards the mirror as if admiring its own reflection. And every single time she picked it up to move it, it felt colder, heavier, a deep, bone-chilling cold that seemed to seep into her skin. On the fifth night, Lena was jolted awake by a whisper. It was a tiny, frail voice, dry and raspy, and it was right beside her ear. "Don't leave me." Lena let out a blood-curdling scream. Her grandfather rushed into the room, flipping on the light switch, his face etched with concern. But the room was still. The doll was back on its chair, silent and motionless, its painted face an expressionless mask. Terrified and desperate, Lena went back to the flea market the next morning. She searched frantically until she found the old seller who had sold the chest to her grandfather. When she described the doll, the man's face turned deathly pale, his eyes wide with fear. "You shouldn't have taken it," he rasped, his voice trembling. "That doll belonged to a girl named Marielle Blackpine. She died in that abandoned house years ago. They say her spirit, her soul. It never left the doll." That night, armed with the horrifying truth, Lena tried to contain the evil she had brought into her home. She found a sturdy wooden box, placed the doll inside, and latched the lid shut. But at the stroke of midnight, the box began to shake, violently, thump, thump. The frantic, heavy sounds echoed in the silent house. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. With a deep, shuddering breath, Lena slowly, cautiously lifted the lid. The doll was sitting upright, its face just inches from hers, its painted mouth. Once a pleasant, closed smile was now open in a silent scream. And from that dark void, a voice emerged, clearer and stronger than before. "You took me from my home, so now you will come with me." Lena Moreau and the porcelain doll disappeared that night. When her grandfather woke the next morning, the house was eerily silent. Lena's bedroom door was wide open, her bed empty. The only clue to the night's horror was a set of tiny porcelain footprints on the floorboards, leading out the front door and toward the dark, looming silhouette of Blackpine House. Some locals say that on quiet nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear a child crying from inside that old abandoned place. Others warn that if you hear a strange tapping at your window late at night, don't look. It's the doll, Marielle, still searching for a new friend to stay with her forever. I used to think cursed objects were just something people exaggerated online, until the day I brought home a doll that nearly ruined my life. It all started when my friend Ethan asked me to help him clean out an abandoned house on the edge of Greyfall Ridge. The previous owner had passed away, and the place was a maze of old furniture and boxes stacked to the ceiling. The whole house just felt heavy, like the air itself didn't want us there. We were clearing the upstairs when I found it. A small wooden box tucked away under a dusty old bed. There were these strange carvings all over the lid symbols I didn't recognize, but they looked almost like scratched warnings. Inside, wrapped in a faded sheet, was a porcelain doll. Its dress was torn, its hair was matted, and its glass eyes were scratched. But somehow they still looked alive. Ethan immediately stepped back. "Dude, don't touch that. It feels wrong, but I just laughed it off. It's just a doll." I really, really wish I had listened to him. I took the box home, thinking it would make a cool, spooky decoration. I placed the doll on a shelf in my living room and did unthink about it for the rest of the night. But the first sign that something was very wrong happened only a few hours later. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a soft thump-that sound of something falling. I went into the living room, and the doll wasn't on the shelf where I'd left it. It was sitting perfectly upright on the floor, facing the hallway. Keep in mind, I live alone. I completely froze. But I convinced myself I must have just placed it badly, and it fell. I put it back on the shelf and went back to bed, trying to ignore the pit in my stomach. The next morning, it had moved again. This time, it was sitting on the couch. Facing my bedroom door, I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I was overtired, and my mind was playing tricks on me. But that feeling, the feeling that something was watching MIT, just wouldn't go away. Every single time I entered the room, my eyes would immediately drift over to that doll. Its scratched glass eyes seemed to follow me. It was unnerving. 2 days later, things escalated. I started hearing footsteps in the hallway late at night. They were slow, dragging footsteps, like someone was shuffling their feet. Every time I'd get up to check, no one was there. But one night, I noticed the doll had turned its head just slightly to the left. I tried to reason with myself, thinking I just hadn't noticed it was positioned that way before. But then the whispering started, soft, breathy words coming from the living room. It was too quiet to understand what was being said, but it was unmistakably human, and it was always around 3 in the morning. Every night, the whispering grew a little bit louder. I completely stopped sleeping in my bedroom and started leaving all the lights on. I was terrified. The worst moment, the one that broke me, happened 3 nights after that. I walked into my kitchen for a glass of water and just froze in place. The doll was sitting on the kitchen table, holding a piece of paper. It was a torn scrap from an old notebook. And on it, in this shaky, desperate handwriting, was a message. It said, "You brought me here. My blood ran absolutely cold." That was it. I grabbed the old wooden box it came in and shoved the doll inside. I had to get it out of my house. I drove straight back to that abandoned house to put it back where I found it. The entire drive, I felt this intense pressure on the back of my neck, like something was staring at me from the back seat. When I reached the house, I ran upstairs and placed the box exactly where I found it, under that bed. I didn't look inside. I didn't want to. As I turned to leave, I heard something behind me, a tiny, distinct scratch on the wooden floor. I didn't turn around. I just ran. For 2 weeks after that, nothing happened. The house was quiet. No footsteps, no whispers, no terrifying messages. I actually started to believe I had escaped it, that it was all over. But one morning I walked into my living room and the air turned to ice. Sitting there on my couch was the doll, its scratched eyes staring straight at me. There was dirt on its dress, as if it had climbed its way all the way back. I moved out of that apartment the very same day. I never saw the doll again. But sometimes, when the house gets too quiet, I swear I can still hear those soft whispers calling my name. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more creepy content. Thanks for watching.